But there's people who are going like, I don't understand. You're talking to a strength and conditioning coach on a wow. I thought this podcast was all about wonder and curiosity and magic. What does all this stuff that we're talking about right now have to do with us living a life that is awake to possibility?
I think it just draws me back to your point about a healthy level of stress is required for a healthy level of growth in small doses. What I do is stress my clients' bodies out in a healthy way where, as long as they're doing everything right outside of our sessions, they get the benefits of them, right? And then you can apply that to everything in life.
Hello, friends. I'm Harris III. Welcome to another episode of the Wow Level Life podcast. We are trying to awaken your wonder, that childlike spirit that allows your imagination to run wild, where anything is possible, where curiosity is driving your approach to life. Your eyes are wide open to all the magic that is around you. Your creative soul is set on fire. You're excited to play, to get your hands dirty in the mud. Life gets exciting when you're pursuing a wow level life. But to pursue a wow level life, there are multiple subjects that we need to explore. And I think today is going to venture into even deeper into one of those subjects. If you listen to last week's episode, I won't ruin the surprise for you because we try to do a fun thing with a story, but you got to begin the conversation of the role that strength, or I should say the role that stress and adversity plays in helping us develop our strength. I asked you some questions to try to get you curious around that theme and topic so we could explore it further with today's special guest. In just a few moments, I want to be joined by Curtis Rigg. He is my personal trainer. I think he has a fancier name than that, but my wife Kate and I love doing workouts with him on a regular basis, and he's taught me a lot about kind of what's going on inside of our minds and in our bodies during a workout in his gym. Curtis really encapsulates a journey of resilience and determination. He's got an incredible story. A lot of it begins with a childhood accident that you'll hear about as we jump into his story in this episode, and how that experience led him to overcome and then eventually get into strength training. And so then he went on to have multiple injuries and challenges, but still fought for and held on to a passion for adaptability and resilience of the human body and how he can help other people do the same. So as a personal trainer and strength and conditioning coach right here in Nashville, Curtis is dedicated, absolutely dedicated to helping other people overcome limitations, helping individuals realize their true potential, drawing from their own experience of overcoming injuries and pursuing their passion. His journey includes a transition from Pennsylvania down here to Tennessee, and he's successfully built and grown his second gym, Innate Performance, here in Nashville. He works with entrepreneurs like us, but also doctors and artists, and a ton of professional athletes. Every single time I am in his gym, it feels like there's another professional athlete, basketball player, soccer player rolling in. He's known around town, and just overall a genuine pro at what he does and a genuinely good dude. So listen in. You're going to like this episode. My conversation with Curtis Rigg. Curtis, I'm so excited to introduce friends to you. You have played a significant role in my life. And so I'm sure when I first asked you to jump on this podcast, there's a part of like, what do I do for a living that has anything to do with wonder?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
And we're going to tie that together by the end of this conversation. So one, I'm pumped that you're willing to join me. This is really exciting for me because I've taken so much that I've learned from you in our time of knowing each other and used it in so many different examples and keynotes and metaphors. I use it in coaching all the time. And so I just think what you do for a living and what you do in the lives of people is so universal that it's easy for it to find its application outside of the gym. And so even though actually, let's let you introduce kind of how you talk about what you do instead of me introducing it to everyone, even though they just heard me build you up and make you a big deal in the intro.
Yeah, that was a pretty great intro, man. I don't know if I can beat that.
Would you say I'm in personal fitness, I'm in peak performance? How do you frame up the work that you're doing?
I mean, on paper, I'm a strength and conditioning coach, right? Like you made it sound so much better than what I could do. Yeah. Or so much more interesting, I should say.
So
But yeah, I
and
mean, personal
conditioning
trainer,
coach.
strength and conditioning coach, everyone's friend.
Yes. Well, and you're a good one. All right. So we're going to get
that.
there. We're going to get to those metaphors. We're going to connect those dots for everyone listening in, because there's so many universal truths to pull out of this conversation. But I want to start with your story, because this is the Wow Level Life podcast. And I feel like you are both in pursuit of and already simultaneously living a Wow Level life. Which is this strange dichotomy, right? Because I think that's all of us. If I walk up to the average person and I'm like, hey, would you feel like you're living a Wow Level life? There's always this gap between where we are and where we wish we were.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're not alone in that feeling. I have that feeling of like, well, no, I'm not there yet. None of us really feel like we've arrived, and yet you're still living an extraordinary life. We talk about that on a regular basis in the gym. It's like, dude, you're living the dream. It's amazing what you've built, and the impact that you're having on athletes at literally the very top level, like some of the world's elite athletes, to the non-elite athletes in the world like me. So it's like, what is a guy who made most of his living doing magic tricks on stage? Why is he in the gym every day?
Hey,
and it's because I came to you going, I want to sleep better. I want more energy with my kids. And even though I came to you going, I want to learn like how to get in better personal shape for a variety of reasons. There's some deeper truths that came out of that, but we're going to get to all that. I want to start with your story. What in the world? What led you to want to become a strength and conditioning coach, in your words?
All right. So, and I mean, this is just for audience because you already know, I mean, my whole story. But obviously when I was 7 years old, I had a tragic accident where I was playing with the neighbor kids. We were playing around in a treehouse. It was a little rainy, kind of slippery. I'm still adventurous, but I was way more adventurous back then. I was hanging off the edge of this treehouse. Long story short, I slipped off. I fell. I don't know how detailed you want me to get into this because it's kind of gruesome. But anyways, landed on my arm in a way that it hyperextended. It bent the way the elbow shouldn't bend. The humerus, the bone in our arm, came completely out, broke through the artery. My arm was hanging on by like maybe a couple millimeters of skin. Let's fast forward a little bit. The doctors didn't think they could save my arm, so I went through a lot of surgery. They were struggling with that, and they basically said, hey, we have to amputate it. You know, if we save his arm, and this was all to my parents, obviously, this is just kind of information reiterated back to me. If we save his arm, you know, he's never going to really have a functioning limb again. He's not going to be able to use it. He's going to relearn how to do everything in life, essentially, right? Which, you know, as a 7-year-old kid, you hear that, you're traumatized. You know, I still remember all of this like it was yesterday.
It's like your parents, like, paint that picture for us, though. Like you're laying in a hospital bed in pain, and they come in and they explain this to you, or they just tell you what's about to happen?
This was just kind of information that was kind of spit back after, because, you know, I was knocked out. You know, I don't really remember too many fine details in the hospital. I don't remember exactly how long I was in the hospital for. But anyways, they ended up saving the arm. And I remember talking to this one doctor about how, like, my sex life would be altered, like my psychology would be different. I would be, like, you know, different, right? Like, so that was my initial kind of spark, I guess I could say. Just when you hear the doctor say you can't do something, that kind of lights a little fire in me a little bit. So I went through months of physical therapy. You know, I couldn't even stack cups together at the time. I had no range of motion in my arm. But eventually that led me to, you know, getting my limb stronger, moving my arm a little bit better, which kind of opened my eyes to, like, wow, like, that's amazing. Like, my physical therapists at that time were like my heroes, right? Like, because we overcame this, what seemed like what was impossible to me, A couple years later, I've had 3 knee surgeries. My ankle was flipped upside down. It's completely made of metal plates and screws. And I've overcome all of those things even better than I was prior to surgery. So I kind of wanted to go to the physical therapy route, going through all of these injuries. I've been through it. I can relate to people on that level that are going through pain and like, be a little bit more encouraging. Like, hey, like I've been here before. So I wanted to go PT route. Long story short, went to college. I don't enjoy learning about things that I don't really care about. And for anyone that, it's just the truth. It's just the truth. Like, for anyone that goes to physical therapy school, at least in my experience, I had to take a lot of chemistry, a lot of like microbiology and looking under microscopes. And then the thing that really steered me away from PT school was the GREs, the like standardized tests that you have to take. You got to like add letters and, algebra and like, I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. During that time, I was working as an exercise physiologist in Philadelphia. I was like a mentor to the physical therapy students that were enrolled in the schools all around. They couldn't really, name me one muscle of the rotator cuff. And like, here I am to like get into PT school. I had to like do algebra. And I'm like, no, this is backwards. So at that moment in time, I was like, okay, well, I'm 25. I need to figure something else out because, I'm always looking for a little bit more movement forward. So I gave my 2-week notice without a plan and just kind of started my own business and then got the snowball rolling. And here we are in Nashville.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing.
So it's been fun. It's been a crazy ride, but yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah. I want to go back into that story for a second. Because it sounds like, oh, well, yeah, duh, of course you overcame this thing and you kept defying odds, and why not just go teach other people to defy odds? And yeah, it doesn't feel that obvious to you in the moment, I'm sure. I bet there were doubts, there were uncertainties.
Oh, yeah.
There was, what can you say about or speak to about feelings you had as a kid when someone's telling you, hey, you won't be able to use your arm again? Did you just like, oh, I'm just going to prove them wrong? Or did you believe them for
it's
a
hard
while?
to say at the time. I mean, looking back, it's easy to say, yeah, probably. Just because like, I kind of look at it like, knowing what I know now, and maybe I didn't realize it at the time, but like adversity was the fire that forges the iron, right? Like that's how I'm here. It seemed very stressful at the time, but I think if you just keep putting one foot in front of the other and, believing in yourself over what other people have their opinions on the situation, I think, that can take you a lot further than what you realize. And it's hard. It's definitely hard because of all the noise around you. But it's been awesome.
So what was your source of, I guess, hope is the first word that comes to mind? The thing that kept your curiosity alive enough to go, I'm going to question the story I'm being told. I don't know if they're right about this. Maybe I can actually use it. Was it your parents? Was it watching superhero movies on TV? Like what gave you hope to go, I can prove them wrong?
It was definitely my parents probably at first, but I do remember the therapist that I was working with when I was 7 was so positive and encouraging, and like, she didn't have a doubt in her head that I couldn't get better and you keep moving forward. And now granted, like my arm's not perfect, but I'm sure if I never told you that I went through this, you probably wouldn't have even noticed, right? Like,
no.
Yeah. So I think having that positivity around me, and during all this time, I was in 2nd grade. My 2nd grade teacher would visit the house. She had all my classmates like write me letters and like, just like positive notes. And I think I still have those letters today, actually. They're somewhere hidden in here. Yeah. But it's been great. Yeah. It's just that kind of like reshaped my mindset a little bit. Like, okay, like, not only am I doing this for myself, but I also have a support system, I don't know where I would be if I didn't have that. Maybe I would have just gave up, but yeah.
Yeah. There was a client I was once working with a few years ago, and she overheard the doctor come into the room to give the diagnosis of what she was struggling with. And the doctor basically, she overheard the doctor saying everything she does for the rest of her life is going to be incredibly hard and she will struggle. And then, in a way, what we realized through our conversations is that sort of became this confirmation bias. And now everything, even if it wasn't that hard, she found a way to make it feel like it was hard or justify like, oh, well, I'm struggling because the doctor was right when I was in the third grade. They said everything was going to be hard. And what it sounds like is you had this really beautiful alternative story told to you, or at least offered to you, that was up for consideration, where even though the doctor said, here's all the things that aren't ever going to work again, you had a couple of other voices that told you a different story and said, hey, maybe they could be wrong. There's hope.
Yeah.
Work hard. Try harder. Push through.
My dad literally told the surgeons, like, hey, take what you need from me to save his arm. They didn't have to do anything like that, but it's nice. It's nice to hear that stuff.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a reminder for all of us out there listening, especially me, to think about like the people that I know who are struggling in my life. Oftentimes we don't feel like there's anything tangible that we can do to play a role. Like I can't go fix someone's arm. Like if you were my friend in the second grade, if we had the privilege of growing up in the same neighborhood and going to school together. And so it's like, imagine we're the same age, we're in the same class. I'm like, well, I'd be willing to give Curtis my arm, but I can't, right? Like the doctor said that's not an option.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I guess there's nothing I can do. And let's just name it. So it is, I guess there's nothing I can do. It's that mentality that limits the potential role that we have the opportunity to play in the lives of others. Because it was that teacher and those notes from our friends.
Right.
Like,
they were,
it may not have felt like much in terms of saving your physical arm, but it gave you the story that you needed to know that you had options on the table, that you didn't just have to accept the reality that was handed to you by the doctors. Right.
Yeah.
It's so cool. It's such a powerful reminder. And just the power of our words. Words, they're almost like magic. We're all looking for magic words like presto and abracadabra. I don't know if any of the notes you got from your friends said those magic words on them, but in the absence of alakazam was probably words that were truly magical to you, that made you define.
They were just very like supportive little letters with a bunch of like second grader drawings on them. They were fun. Yeah. But they meant a lot, like you said, it's magic. Yeah.
It's a good reminder to us to not underestimate the power of our words. Okay, so you're healing up, and then all of a sudden you become intrigued by the idea of becoming a physical therapist, and you're just like, that's not for me, and yet you were mentoring other people who were physical therapists. And one of the things that I think that part of your story just sort of showcases, which aligns with my experience with you, is this. I don't know that I've ever used this word in a conversation. Contrarian, sort of like a contrarian way of operating within a certain industry. I don't want to get you in trouble, but like I have friends that I've sent to your gym and you've told them the opposite of what their doctor told them to do, and they got better faster.
This sounds so bad.
I know, it sounds bad. It sounds bad.
I just have to say, I am not a physical therapist, guy. Here's what I would do.
Yeah.
And I hope I don't come across that like I'm bashing the physical therapy industry. I have a lot of great physical therapy friends. It's just, it wasn't the road that I wanted to go down, and not to mention I wasn't smart enough to get into school. So Totally. But I'll just say it for you, and you can agree or disagree, or just say no comment, and like stay out of trouble. Right. But it is not, there are almost not even multiple industries. Almost every single industry on the planet has some form of outdated methodologies or way of doing things. And we're doing things a certain way in certain industries just because that's the way they've always been done, or that's the most common advice. Or what is probably more accurate in that example I was talking about with our friend's, foot being in a boot, is there's the right advice for the majority of people, maybe, because of how the majority of people behave. And so therefore, what is very common in medical professions is
let's just go with kind of the status quo expectation of how we know patients are going to behave or what they're willing to do or not willing to do. And so it's easy to throw a doctor under the bus going, oh, you're just in bed with pharmaceutical companies and you're just prescribing this drug. You're treating the symptoms. Why don't we actually treat the root problem? It's like, okay, it's easy to give doctors flack about that, but is the average patient willing to do the work to solve the actual real problem? Are they willing to stop eating McDonald's drive-through every single day? And if the doctor knows, well, the average patient is not going to stop going through the McDonald's drive-through every single day, well, then that doctor's best chance of helping that patient is probably to prescribe that drug, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean that advice is bad, but it also doesn't deny that more contrarian approach of maybe there's a better way for some people. And I think that's what I've seen you do time in and time out. And so I want to talk a little bit about that, because I think the story that you just told us, the story that you've lived, and the work that you're doing are obviously intertwined, as they are for all of us. But I have a feeling there's people listening in who haven't been able to connect those dots in their own work, in their own view. So let's unpack that a little bit. You were told, I'll never be able to use my arm again. And yet you did. You didn't want to go to physical therapy school. And yet, even though you're not a physical therapist, you are helping people accomplish things that some physical therapists haven't been able to help them do. You are consistently defying the odds in the lives of your clients that you're working with and in your own personal life. Do you have a realization? I'm putting you on the spot here big time.
I love this. It's okay.
Have you ever had the realization of connecting those dots and seeing the connection between the story you've lived and the way in which you do your work?
Not until I met you, right? Like because we've talked about this before. I didn't really appreciate the impact of storytelling in general. And then, after a couple of conversations with you and Kate and your team, it got me to kind of like open my eyes a little bit, like, okay, like this kind of makes sense. Now, granted, like I said before, I did know like that initial injury when I was 7 did kind of ignite my initial passion for the field itself.
Being aware that you do things differently, and maybe perhaps part of the reason you do things differently from so many other people in your field is because you had to do things differently to prove the professionals. You say professionals with people who are listening instead of watching right now, with quotation marks around it, the professionals. You had to literally take what the professionals said and do something different. You had to believe.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily do a lot different. It's just, I think it's not that it's different, right? Like, you got me thinking now, man.
Can we just use a real life example? So like I referred one of my best friends to you.
Yeah.
Part of the reason I referred,
I know where you're going with this.
I was struggling with an injury. He was struggling with this injury. And everything that you were having both of us do was counterintuitive to all the advice that people with those injuries typically receive. And at first, I was like, is this dude crazy? Why is he telling us the opposite of what common sense would say? And yet what we discovered is that common sense that exists in our culture, it's just like, oh, that's just the way we've always done it. And so one of those examples is like, get that boot off your foot instead of walking around a boot and waiting for this to heal in 3 months or 6 months, or whatever. Let's get it done in 6 weeks.
That was after we knew, there wasn't too bad of a sprain or a break, and the imaging was clear. And he was able to put pressure and apply, force to the ground on that foot. But yeah, so I think in that situation that you're describing, like you said, it's easier to just say, hey, put this boot on for 6 weeks. And insurance, if you're an insurance-based practitioner, they have to follow certain protocols. They're only, allowed to do certain things. Whereas, I don't bill through insurance, so I can do whatever I want. After you sign the waiver, of course. So yeah, I do take a more like holistic, more direct route, I guess I should say.
Yes.
As far as under, certain circumstances, like had he had a more serious injury, I might have not went that way, but he was okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
So it's not a disregard for responsibility and wisdom. Like you're not being reckless. But some of this, I think, is informed by your experience working with elite
Yeah.
athletes.
Yeah.
Because let's be honest, the stuff that I see happen sometimes on TV to professional athletes, and they're like carried off the field, and the fact that they're coming back and playing again in the third period or the second half or the whatever, means there's some approaches out there that have extraordinary results that the average person is not aware of nor has access to. Correct?
Yeah, I guess so.
And I would say at the heart of some of that is to do things in a counterintuitive way, putting pressure on something where someone says, "Oh, prop it up and keep the pressure off," right? Which takes me to one of the things that I was most excited to talk to you about, which is just this idea of stress and resistance being a source of growth. I don't know if you all remember this or not, but during some of our first times working out together, I had this. I feel foolish even admitting this publicly. To make it to my 40s and to not know this feels dumb. But you're just like, hey man, you're doing way too much cardio and not enough recovery. And I was like, what do you mean? Like you're telling me I'm on the Peloton bike pedaling too hard? And you're like, yeah, bring the zone down. And none of this made sense to me. And to make a really long story short, over the course of weeks, what I ended up learning about was the role of the recovery process. And I'm like, well, what is the role of the recovery process? They're like, well, all of this is stressing your body out. We want the right amount of stress and then the right amount of time giving your body a chance to rest and recover, because that's repairing all the damage that we're doing through the stress. And it was one of the first times, maybe I was just finally old enough to be able to see the perspective, because you're certainly not the first person who tried to explain it to me. But I realized, gosh, this isn't just true in the gym. This is true of all of life. All of our growth, whether it's in our physical muscles, in our body, in our physical performance, or in our mindset, in our parenting, in our personal relationships, in our friendships, all of it comes down to resistance training. So
I like that, actually.
Some people listening in will understand this. A lot of people are probably going to be like me, and they're just like, I've actually never taken the time to fully understand it. Why is resistance so powerful, and why does it make us stronger? Just give us the basics.
I mean, I think, a certain level of resistance forces us to like reshape the way we look at things, calm and simplicity in life, they're great, but they're not transformative. Is that kind of like what you're going along with?
Let's just take it back to the actual science in the gym. Why do my muscles get stronger if I stress them out?
I thought we were like getting real like...
No, not yet. We're getting there. But why? Let's just understand the science of building muscle.
Yeah.
Why does a bodybuilder develop huge muscles?
I mean, you're applying a certain level of stress, which is, external load as far as weight on the body. You're forcing the body to lift that up to a point of failure or, fatigue. What the body has to do, during those sets or how much volume you're applying to that, assuming you're going to a point of failure, or close to it, I should say. The body then has to, after it breaks down the muscle tissue, you got to rest, eat enough protein to build up the amino acids to regrow the muscle, because now the body's, it wants to adapt to that environment that you just put it in. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. So can I get stronger without stressing out my muscles?
I'm going to just say no. I could probably think of like certain things, but.
And yet, how often is stress something that we view as the thing to be avoided?
Often. I think people see stress as like a bad word, right? But stress is great. Just like you said, it forces us to grow. A certain amount, like a healthy amount of stress, right? Correct. It's like filling up a bucket. You don't want to overfill the bucket either.
Which then takes us to the recovery part of the conversation that was so enlightening for me. So the stress plays a role in me getting stronger. I have to stress my muscles out in order for them to grow. Why do I need to rest in order for my muscles to get stronger?
I mean, you keep applying stress, you're going to overfill that bucket that I was talking about, right? Um, which then you're at risk for injury. It's like a nice little cyclical event happening. If you go too far in one direction, that's too much. If you don't go far enough, that's not enough. You're not challenging the body to adapt to the new environment that you're placing on it.
Yeah, so good. Okay, so this is where we get back to life school and living a wow level life. I think there's a lot of people out there, and this was me for so long, because of what you're talking about. It's like stress is viewed as such a bad word. It's just like, how do you live a stress-free life? How do you eliminate the stress from your life? No stress, no stress. That seems to be everyone's goal, and yet everyone is stressed out, seemingly, right? And yet, meanwhile, we also have no recovery time, or very poor recovery time. We don't have rest. We don't have margin. We don't have peace built into our lives or our schedules. It's just go, 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 go. And so maybe the conversation is less about whether stress is bad and more about optimal stress, the right kinds of stress.
How to manage it, maybe.
Yeah. And not just managing it, but I think there's a lot of people listening to this who fall into the camp of, they're like, I'm not stressed at all. They might be worried about something. They might be experiencing some anxiety, and that might feel like they're kind of stressed out. But the source of stress is the feelings of anxiety and not the activity that they're participating in. And I'm not just talking about physical activity in a workout. I know when it comes to even the work that we're doing in the world, the business that I'm trying to grow, the meaningful work that you're doing in the world and the business that you're trying to grow, a lot of that growth is happening outside of our comfort zones. It happens during the chapters in our story where we're taking on a little bit of extra stress, right? You're now working with a lot of other trainers in your gym that you own. That's extra stress because you're the guy at the end of the day who's got to pay all the bills, right? They can just walk out and be like, oh, it didn't work out. You're like, bank's going to call me and take everything I own if I don't keep this place out of the red, right?
Keep the lights on, yeah.
Yeah. So you are choosing to take on stress during seasons of growth. And I just think we view this the wrong way. And so it makes me wonder, what are some ways that we can intentionally stress ourselves out in ways that are healthy for the sake of growth in whatever area of life we want to experience it in? And so I don't expect you to have to have I don't want to put you on the spot and be like, tell us all the answers about the school of life, Curtis. What I want to do is learn from your expertise as a trainer, as a strength and conditioning coach, so that we can leverage everything we can about the science of how we get stronger and condition our bodies to perform better as a metaphor for how we do that in our personal lives as well. So let's talk about some of the athletes that you train. We don't have to name names. That's not the point. What do you see them doing consistently that enables them to perform at the top level that correlates with the work you do in the gym every single day?
I mean, are we talking in season or off season, or just
general? That's even interesting. Is there a different protocol?
Yeah. I mean, it's tough because, I mean, as you know, I train primarily basketball players. They have a really, really demanding season. So I don't know if that's the best example because, obviously, let's just say we're in season, right? They have 3 to 4 games a week. The level of stress, or let's just say my training, strength and conditioning, that you can apply to them during that period is way less than what I can do off season, where they don't have games. They're not traveling. They're not sleeping in hotels. Their sleep is, a little bit more regulated. So when you're programming, and that's why, it's such a beautiful puzzle that you have to build, you have to take all of this into account. Because if you're, like I said, if you're overstressing their system, they're not going to improve off season to get ready for the next season, right? Maybe I can tip the bucket too far one way. So you really have to hone in on their lives. Hey, what are you doing? How many times are you practicing on the court? What's your travel look like? Vacations, they like to party. So are you sleeping? Right. There's just so many questions and checklists you have to unpack before you can even think about seeing what you're going to give them.
And is the goal of unpacking all that to find the optimal level of stress that you put them through.
Yeah, and also
in
like the
workout
lowest
itself?
hanging fruits. Yeah, like the lowest hanging fruits that like I can really just take advantage of. As far as okay, like let's look back at your last season. How's your conditioning? Like I watched 50 of your games. You barely played over 12 minutes without wheezing out. So like we got some conditioning work to do. Maybe we need to get a little stronger. Did you get pushed around? Were there any injuries that I could kind of look at from a biomechanical perspective? Can I clean anything up? There's just a lot. It's a lot, and that's what's fun to me about it. It's everyone, they have a different blueprint. They walk in with a different story. So it's fun to kind of unpack that and kind of like find this, nice template for a training program,
Yeah. Yeah. Now let's bring that down to the non-athletic people like me.
Yeah, you're a great example.
I don't really have an on season or an off season, so to speak. It's just there's always three children at home that are
I think you're always in season. Yeah.
So the average, let's just call them the average. I don't think there's an average person. We're all, capable of greatness, and we all are extraordinary. All of our stories are extraordinary. Even people who say like, "Oh, my story's not that unique or special." It's like, gosh, you just don't realize how amazing our story is. And like, I know it can be overstated, but the fact that we are on a spinning rock that's rotating at a crazy high speed around the sun on a regular basis without us flying off of it because of gravity, and the fact that there's the right amount of oxygen balanced with the right amount of everything else so that we can breathe and function. Like, it's miraculous. It's miraculous that we're
Isn't it fascinating?
So we are extraordinary. We are absolutely extraordinary.
Yeah,
but to the person who's out there going, gosh, like major athletes at the top of their field, that's not me. I don't need that type of strength and conditioning. But I still would like to live a wow level life. What do I need to be doing personally that gets me to a point where I'm creating space for more possibility in my life?
I guess the first thing I would always make sure is that like nothing feels forced. I don't want them to think that, oh, I have to strength train, right? Like I have to do this. I care more about, if it's someone like relatively new that just feels like, oh, I need to get some sort of exercise in. Okay, like what do you like to do? I want you to enjoy that thing first. And then maybe, you get that movement in. Maybe you consider a little bit of strength training, and like maybe you can see the benefits of how strength training can help doing that activity in the first place, through, getting stronger at it, preventing any injuries. And that's when, I think we can really mold something else. But again, it all depends on, schedule wise. A guy like yourself, like you're a busy guy. I don't want to make you ever feel like you're forcing yourself to work out, because then you can't stick to it anyways because you don't enjoy it. I think setting goals is important too, because if you have like a goal, you're more than likely to stick to something for a longer period of time. A goal that you, of course, want to do, right? Like,
yeah, let's talk about that for a second, because a lot of people hear goals and they think like, oh, the goal of 18% body fat and being able to see.
Yeah, like what does that mean, right? Like,
yeah. But for you,
it's too surface level.
Like, let's pick something that you want to do. And I was like, well, I'm backpacking Yosemite again. I want to climb Half Dome this summer.
Yeah, that was the most motivated that I've ever seen you, right?
Yeah.
So I encourage you to set more of those trips for me. But
yeah. But what is it about the goal? Like when you see clients with a goal like that versus working with a client without goals, what's the difference in how they show up?
It just means more to them. It gives them something to care more about. It makes things more real, right? Like they have something that they can shoot for rather than, oh, I want to bench press 200 pounds. Like that's cool and all, but like, why? You know what I mean? Like it just doesn't mean much. Like I said, it's a little bit too surface level. So you got to dig a little bit deeper than that, and like you use the example of, I want to be able to play with my kids and not feel, gassed or tired, or I want to crawl around on the floor and not hurt myself. And that's a little bit more important. Those are things that I could work with for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. These days, I want to be able to get out of bed without hurting myself.
Yeah. Well, I haven't seen you in a little while either.
I'm being called out publicly.
Yeah. I had to bring that in sometime. I was just waiting for that moment. Your wife's doing great, though, by the way.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks for throwing me under the bus next time. We'll absolutely have comments on that in the next episode for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so have a goal. That was the second thing that you mentioned. With something else to anyone listening in who's just like, man, I want to live a wild level life. I've never stopped to pause and because we've gotten a long way into this episode before coming back to this idea. But there's people who are going like, I don't understand. You're talking to a strength and conditioning coach on a wild. I thought this podcast was all about wonder and curiosity and magic. And we'll make sure no one leaves confused about what the role is. But I would love to hear it from your perspective. What does all this stuff that we're talking about right now have to do with us living a life that is awake to possibility?
Man, this is some deep questions here. I think it just draws me back to your point about like a healthy level of stress is required for a healthy level of growth in small doses. And what I do is stress my clients' bodies out in a healthy way where as long as they're doing everything right outside of our sessions, they get the benefits of them, right? And then you can apply that to everything in life. Kind of like my arm was a stressful situation, but I grew from that and I built what I did with that initial motivation in mind. Same thing with all my other injuries. I saw that as an opportunity for growth rather than like a reason to shut down. And, it's built what it has so far. And to your point, like I'm always chasing more and more and more. So I think I thrive in a little bit of chaos versus like stagnation. So I don't know how to explain that to someone that I don't know, like what does that even mean? But
I think it's good. I think when you're saying I thrive in a little bit of chaos, it's probably true for all of us. It's just what you mean by chaos is probably a little bit of stress. We all need a little bit of stress. And that's what I hope folks hear and take away from this conversation is, gosh, if I want to lean in, if I want to experience a more extraordinary life, I have to take a more holistic approach to how I'm going to do that. And so one, I would at least consider like your level of physical fitness. It absolutely has to do with, if anything, it's just a really great case study. It gives us an opportunity to just work on something like our mindset. A gym makes for an incredible life school, right?
Yeah.
The best
it forces
trainers
you to
are probably also
yourself.
life coaches. Yes.
Yes. I never really realized that, but talk to a lot of people every day. Yeah.
I know. You probably feel like a therapist some days.
Well, I have to remind some people that like I train from the neck down.
I don't know if that's true, dude. I don't know if that's true. And maybe that's your, like the professional side of you that's saying like my professional expertise is from the neck down. But I think to our point, like what we were just saying is, you find out what you're really capable of oftentimes in a gym.
Yeah.
You hit some of your rock bottoms in a gym. You get to fight some of those demons in the gym, those limiting beliefs that get in your head. It's the time where you come in contact with wanting to quit over and over and over again. Sometimes that stuff shows up most often in a gym during a workout. So I just think it should be a part of all of our journeys towards living what I would consider to be a wild level life. And my hope from this interview wasn't necessarily to give someone like the 7-step process to how to get in shape. That's not what it's about. It's about pausing and asking, am I committed to growth? Is more possible than I realize? Or am I assuming that whatever condition I am in, if I'm unhappy with it, that's just the way it has to be because someone else told me it was going to be that way. And you're a living, breathing example of someone who has defied the odds. But the odds, I think, are often, I say again, odds with quotation marks around them. The odds are, I don't even know if they're the real odds. I think they're just the odds statistically based on the fact that most people settle for the script that's been handed to them. And you tore up that script that was handed to you by a doctor because a teacher and some students and a therapist gave you a different one. I think that's awesome and beautiful.
You have such a unique way of looking at things. It's amazing.
Well, so do you. And that was the hope, is to draw from the metaphor of personal strength and conditioning and fitness to have a conversation around stress and recovery, and what it looks like to be open and curious to a different story than the ones that were handed. So
I love that.
It's been amazing. All right, as we wrap this up, is there anything that we haven't talked about or a question that I haven't asked you that hasn't given you the opportunity to say something that you are super passionate about saying that you want to leave listeners with?
I don't think so. I mean, I feel like, you kind of hit the nail on the head, like way better than what I could explain, as far as like how what I do in my career, can be metaphorically tied to life in general. You're, like I said, just the way you look at those things it puts a new perspective into my eyes, and makes me kind of rewire things and think about them in a new lens, which is what I need. But as far, I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, you're a special human. You're a special human being. And that's not me like blowing smoke. Like your approach to this is incredibly unique. And the results that you help your clients get speak for themselves.
Appreciate that.
And your contrarian approach is one that I value, that I hope that you continue to keep up. You're an inspiration to me and to so many others, not just in what you've accomplished and the fact that your arm works and that you can jump as high as you can on a bionic ankle.
Hey, well, our kitchen cabinets in our house are a little too high, so there's only one way to get up there, man.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Like I know we can't make Curtis jump here on the podcast, but if there was go check out his Instagram. Maybe that's a good place to end. Tell everyone your Instagram handle so they can at least go watch some videos of you jumping in what looks like superhuman heights.
It's just my name, Curtis Rigg, CurtisRigg. And the whole jumping thing, I think I've told you, since I train all of these basketball players, I'm only 5'8" for the people that have never seen me in person. So when I'm training 6'10" basketball players, they wonder why they should listen to me, because I'm just this short dude, So I bet them that I could dunk a basketball, and it took me about 6 months. And I don't know if it fully counts, but I'll take it. You know what I mean? It's on my Instagram. I'll let them decide. But I don't have, my hands aren't big enough to hold the ball.
But I mean, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable how high you can jump. If you go into Curtis's gym, which is, tell everyone the name of your gym here in Nashville.
It's Innate Performance.
Innate Performance. So if you ever walk into Innate Performance in Nashville, you will see these chalky fingerprints on the beams up on the roof. You're just like, oh, was some dude up there painting something and had some white paint? And like while he was up on the ladder, and you're like, no, bro, there was never a ladder. That was me leaping off the floor.
Who needs a ladder?
Yeah. So you are practicing what you preach, and you're
I'm just trying to explore my true potential, and that's kind of what I preach to all my clients is explore what you're truly capable of, and then I guess you can relate that to life in general, right?
Yeah Man, I think that's an incredible place to end. If you're listening in, like if you're not exploring what you're truly capable of, you don't want to get to a season later in life and look back with regret, asking what if.
Regret, right? Yeah.
You're going to get to the question of what if anyway. You're going to be curious, and you're going to wonder, what if you would have taken the shot? What if you would have made the investment? What if you would have showed up at the gym? What if you would have asked her out? What if you would have? There's a million examples of that, right? What if? Let's get to that what if now and follow through on it. And hopefully this conversation with Curtis has been an inspiration to you to follow through on that more is possible than you realize. It doesn't matter what someone else has told you is or isn't going to happen. More is possible than you realize, and there's another story that you're capable of living. But it's going to take some work. The journey will probably include some stress and some resistance, but that's also how we grow and overcome challenges and find out what we're truly capable of. Dude, this has been awesome. Thanks for letting me put you on the spot. I know this is not, you're not
thank you for having me, man.
Public figures out doing the press circuit. And so I know
you're just a way better speaker than I am. That was a mic drop ending right there. I don't even need to say anything else anymore.
I'm grateful that you were willing to show up and have a conversation with me and step outside of your own comfort zone by getting on a camera in front of a microphone. You're awesome.
Oh yeah. This has been fun. Let's do it again sometime.
Sounds good. We will.
All right.
All right. I told you he was a good guy, right? You can just tell by listening to him. So much humility, and so many times to try to put him on the hot seat and be like, Curtis, man, teach us how this works. Tell us how awesome you are. And he's just like, I'm not awesome. I'm just a guy. And yet, not just a guy who's overcome so much adversity. What an incredible story. And the fact that he took so much pain and turned it into purpose-driven work, so the work that he's doing today as a strength and conditioning coach, it's just incredibly inspiring to me. And his contrarian approach to how he works with stress and the human body, I just love him. I've worked out with a lot of trainers over the years, but I've never worked out with someone who approaches personal fitness and overall strength and conditioning quite like he does. So shout out again to Curtis from Innate Performance for being willing to sit down for that episode. That's something that he doesn't do a lot of. He doesn't like to consider himself an internet influencer. And so to come on a podcast like this for him is a big step. And so I'm super grateful that he was willing to do so. If you enjoyed that episode, show him some love. Go find him online, Innate Performance, Curtis Rigg, R-I-G-G. You can find him pretty quickly on Instagram. Just give him a little virtual high five, being like, hey, man, leave a comment on one of his recent posts. Send him a DM. Hey, heard you on the Wow Level Life podcast. That's really cool. What an amazing story. Go send him a word of encouragement, because I want that story to reach as many people as possible, because it can stir your sense of wonder. It can give you permission to believe in some of the stuff that you're pursuing and give you the ability to push through some of the stress and adversity that you're being challenged by right now and in the future. And speaking of that stress and adversity, we've been through it a lot in our lives lately in my family. And so next week in our Afterglow episode, we're going to take this theme and continue to unpack it. I'm going to be joined by Kate, my wife and co-host. We're going to sit down and talk about not just some of the things that Curtis has taught us as an extended portion of this conversation, but also how we have learned to navigate some of that stress in our own lives, and perhaps how you can do the same. And hopefully we can reframe some of your mindset on that. All right, that's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have not done so yet, please leave a rating or a review. If you are enjoying this podcast, we would greatly appreciate that. You will notice there have not been lots of time of pitching you stuff and trying to sell you stuff. And it's because, frankly, we don't really have anything to sell you right here on the Wow Level podcast. This is a labor of love. We're doing this because these are conversations that we just really wanted to have, and we think they matter. And we felt like this was a unique framing of some of the conversations that we wanted to have. And so we felt like this podcast and its unique format might be of service to you. And so if you agree and you're like, yeah, I'm enjoying it, it doesn't take much time at all and cost you absolutely $0 to just click that little 5 stars on the platform that you listen on and leave us a positive rating. Or even better yet, take an extra 30, 60 seconds and just type some kind words and leave a positive review. And that's going to help other people find this podcast. At this time of recording, the Wow Level Life, just a few episodes in, is already in the top 10% of podcasts globally. Top 10% of all podcasts worldwide. We are just getting started, and it is thanks to people like you spreading the word, telling their friends, and leaving those rating and reviews that have made that possible. So I can't wait to bring you another conversation with Kate next week. I'm pumped about it. The Afterglow episodes have been amazing and are quickly already becoming one of my favorite parts of producing this podcast. All right. Thank you so much for listening to the Wow Level Life podcast. We will talk to you next week as we continue to pursue Wow Level lives together. Talk to you soon.